Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, Operation London Bridge. The long-standing era of Queen Elizabeth II comes to an end as the longest reigning monarch of British history bids farewell. The new king will be called Charles III. More assistance. Sri Lankan government signs $200 million emergency assistance loan agreement with the Asian Development Bank and a $3 million grant from Japan Fund for prosperous and resilient Asia and the Pacific. Mandatory measures. President Ranil Wickremesinghe advises officials to revise circulars immediately if it impedes the implementation of development projects. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Friday the 9th of September 2022.
Vim Deara milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, the long-standing era of Queen Elizabeth II came to an end yesterday with Buckingham Palace announcing the demise of the longest reigning monarch of British history. Queen Elizabeth II has ushered in 15 prime ministers to the United Kingdom and seen the growth of the Commonwealth of Nations. With her demise, her oldest son, King Charles III, assumed the throne with his wife Camilla to be Queen Consort. Last afternoon, Buckingham Palace issued a statement announcing that the health condition of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was under medical supervision after the Queen's doctors expressed concerns over her health condition. According to international news agencies, the news of Her Majesty's troubled health had drawn many citizens worried, some even crying outside the royal palace, braving torrential rains to stand at the palace gates. International reports state that the monarch has been experiencing mobility issues for quite some time, with back pains experienced over the years and a knee surgery she had undergone late in the 2000s. Only 2 days ago on Tuesday, Queen Elizabeth welcomed 2 prime ministers to the Balmoral Castle to ensure the smooth transition of power between outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson to Liz Truss, the 15th British Prime Minister to take office under her reign. Nevertheless, the news of the weakening health condition of the monarch also saw Prince Charles travelling to the Balmoral Castle in Scotland with his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall. Prince Harry and Meghan, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward immediately rushed to Scotland yesterday. Princess Anne, the Queen's only daughter, was also already in Scotland, having undertaken royal duties in the country this week. Despite well wishes for the Queen's recovery, Buckingham Palace announced the sombre news of the demise of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Palace announced the Queen had died peacefully earlier in the afternoon. As is tradition, the statement was attached.
News that devastated the hearts of many people in the UK and many around the world. Issuing a statement, her son succeeding her, King Charles III, stated that, quote, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world." The UK's new British Prime Minister Liz Truss made the official announcement to the people of the UK regarding the demise of the Queen at number 10 Downing Street.
The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain. Today, the crown passes. as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
With the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the reign of her son King Charles III finally begins at the age of 73. Now that there is a king to the throne, the next in line to succeed King Charles III is his eldest son Prince William. His Majesty King Charles's wife Camilla, the once Duchess of Cornwall, will now have a new title as Queen Consort. The final rites of late Queen Elizabeth II will be officially announced within the next 2 weeks, with the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is a senior bishop of the Church of England, is expected to lead the service. Now here's a look back at the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II during her reign of 70 years. Born in Mayfair, London on the 21st of April in 1926 was Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, a child with little to no expectation of exceeding the throne of the British monarch. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born to Prince Albert, Duke of York, and his wife Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the eldest of 2 daughters. Mary was the third in line of succession to the British throne under her uncle Edward and her father. However, due to an unexpected turn in events, she had to accede the throne at the age of 25 on the 6th of February 1952. With the demise of her grandfather George V in 1936, her uncle succeeded as Edward VIII, but later abdicated in order to marry divorcee Wallis Simpson, provoking a constitutional crisis. Consequently, Elizabeth's father became king, taking the regal name of George VI. Her mother became Queen Elizabeth following King George's death in 1952, becoming Queen Mother, while her daughter became Queen Elizabeth II. Princess Elizabeth had received the news of her father's death by her husband Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and a subsequent accession to the throne during one of her visits to Nairobi in Kenya. The coronation ceremony of Queen Elizabeth was one that grabbed the world's attention in 1953 with splendor, as the world watched the United Kingdom usher in the reign of the country's longest monarch in British history. In 1953, the Queen and her husband embarked on a 7-month round-the-world tour, visiting 13 countries and covering more than 40,000 miles in land, sea and air. Queen Elizabeth championed the growth of the Commonwealth nations, which consisted of a small group of 7 nations, to include 53 countries currently. The monarch has seen some of Britain's most iconic prime ministers usher in various times to the nation, starting from Winston Churchill, including Margaret Thatcher, until the country's newest premier, Liz Truss. Britain's Queen Elizabeth was the longest reigning monarch in British history and the second longest in world history after France's Louis XIV. Her life's long dedication has been the personification of dignity and grace, as a woman to live through times that didn't uphold women in the highest of regard, and the fight for equality in rights was long drawn. Her Majesty celebrated her Platinum Jubilee early this year in June with a 4-day bank holiday in the country, accompanied by many other celebrations. After 70 years of successful reign on the throne, the 8th of September marked the end of the Elizabethan era. Stay with us for more news on the other side of this break.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමූතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇති අයට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. Now, Sri Lanka, as a former colony of the British Empire and a Commonwealth nation, has declared the 19th of this month as a national day of mourning. The demise of Queen Elizabeth is a moment in world history that affects Sri Lanka as a former colony of the British Empire. President Ranil Wickremesinghe instructed the Ministry of Public Administration and Home Affairs to have a national flag at half-mast in all government institutions from today until the 19th of September to mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II. He also declared the 19th of September as a national day of mourning to mourn the demise of the monarch. Taking to his official Twitter handle, President Ranil Wickremesinghe expressed his sorrow and heartfelt condolences over the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to the royal family and the people of the UK and the Commonwealth. The head of state said she was a symbol of stability and endurance and she will be greatly missed. Queen Elizabeth II had visited the island nation on 2 separate occasions. The monarch's first visit to the island nation was in 1954 between the 10th to the 21st of April, a year after her coronation as the Queen. She came to deliver the throne speech commencing the first session of the second parliament of the country. Her second visit was in 1981. She visited Sri Lanka from the 21st to the 25th of October in conjunction with the Golden Jubilee celebrations held to celebrate universal franchise in Sri Lanka. Speaking to AdaDerana's English News, former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations for Disarmament, Dr. Jayantha Dhanapala shared his experience with the monarch.
I was privileged to be posted on my first diplomatic posting to London in the UK in 1966. And it was during that time that I had the privilege of meeting Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And this was done when we were all, as members of the diplomatic corps, invited to the Buckingham Palace. I met both Queen Elizabeth and her husband and visited Buckingham Palace, both for the annual diplomatic party as well as for the garden reception that was held for the entire diplomatic corps. It was a memorable occasion, and what struck me was how gracious the Queen was in spite of the large crowd she had to meet and the fact that this was a very crowded occasion. Thereafter, I was also present at the garden party in the summer of 1966, and it was again a memorable occasion where the Queen, despite the fact that she was meeting scores of people, as gracious as ever because of her personality. I think what was exceptional about Queen Elizabeth was the way in which she radiated her personality to the people of Britain, and she was able to relate directly to the people of Britain and have a very simple homespun relationship with them, making the British monarchy very meaningful.
In Parliament today, Chief Opposition Whip Lakshman Kiriyalla called on the government to table the staff-level agreement reached with the International Monetary Fund in Parliament, citing that it is essential to debate the contents of the staff-level agreement. In response, Speaker of Parliament Mahinda Yapa said the central bank governor has informed him that the tabling of the agreement needs approval of the finance minister due to the inclusion of sensitive tax proposals in it. Prior to the commencement of today's parliamentary sitting, a 2-minute silence was observed in the House in honour of Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away yesterday.
On the passing away of Queen Elizabeth II, head of the Commonwealth and of Britain, I propose that we observe 2-minute silence in her memory.
Following the 2-minute silence, the parliamentary sitting began for the day with the opposition demanding the tabling of the staff-level agreement the government reached with the IMF.
ඉදිරියේදී පවත්වන පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ විශේෂ කමිටු රැස්වීමේදී මම අපේ රජය ජාත්‍යන්තර මුල්ල අරමුදලක් සමග ඇති වූ එකඟතාවය ගැන විවාදයක් ඉල්ලන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඉතින් මගේ ඉල්ලීම ඒ දිනට කලින් මේ එකඟත්වය හරි ගිවිසුම හරි ඒ වගේම ආණ්ඩුව බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන දේ හරි මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට දැනුම් දුන්නොත් අපේ විවාදයට උදව් වෙනවා. මොකද ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ඔබතුමා දන්නවා මේ ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ සාර්ථක කරගන්න විපක්ෂයේ රටේ ජනතාවගේ සහයෝගය ඕන. මේක හංගල කරන්න බෑ. අපි කැමති සහයෝගය දෙන්න. We must know what exactly what the government wants to do.
ඔබතුමාගේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මම අද උදෑසන ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහ බැංකුවේ ගවර්නර් සමග සාකච්ඡා කරා. එතුමා කියනවා එතුමාගේ කිසිම විරෝධයක් නැහැ ඉදිරිපත් කෙරුවට. ඒකේ කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. එතුමා සූදානම් වුණ වෙලාවක මේ වාර්තාව දෙන්න. නමුත් ඒක මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයාගේ අවසාන තීරණය. ඒකට හේතුව වෙන්නේ මේ යෝජනාවල බදු සංවේදී යෝජනා කීපයක් තියෙනවා කලින් ප්‍රකාශ කර නොහැකි.
පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට තමයි මුදල් බලය තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට හෙළි කරන්න බැරි කරුණු තියෙනවා කියලා කාටවත් කියන්න බෑ. අපි මේවා හොරෙන් කරනවා කියලා කිව්වොත් ජනතාව විරුද්ධ වෙනවා. We must be open.
ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම IMF එකත් එක්ක ඇතිවෙන ගිවිසුමක් පිළිබඳව කරුණු හෙළිදරව් කිරීමේ කිසිම ගැටලුවක් නැහැ. ඒ කරුණු හෙළිදරව් කරන්න රජයේ හැටියට කිසිම පසුබට වෙන්නේ නැහැ. තාම එවැනි ගිවිසුමක් නැහැ. අවබෝධතාවයක් විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. අවසාන ගිවිසුමක් ඇති වෙන්නේ IMF එකේ බෝඩ් එකේ අප්‍රූවල් එක ලැබුණාන් පස්සේ. ඒ නිසා ඉදිරි දිනයකදී ඒ කටයුතු සිදු වෙනකොට ඒක දෙනවා. ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි අපි පසුගිය දවසේ එකඟ වුණා ගරු අගමැතිතුමාගේ ප්‍රධානත්වයෙන් රැස් වෙලා ජාතික සභාව පිහිටුවේ. දැන් ඒ කටයුතු අපි හැකියක්මනින් අවසන් කරනවා ඊළඟ සභාව ව්‍යාපාරය වෙනකොට. එතකොට ඔබතුමා කිව්ව විවාදයට පෙර ආතුව ජාතික සභාවට මේකේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති රාමුව ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ජාතික සභාව පිහිටවන්නේ පක්ෂ නායකින්ගේ සමන්විතව මේ රජයට මඟ පෙන්වීමක් කිරීමේ ප්‍රථම පරමාර්ථය තමයි එතන තියෙන්නේ ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමා.
Now, the Information and Communication Technology Agency has made it possible for the registration of non-motor categories in the National Fuel Pass system. The method of registration is to be informed to citizens and businesses by the Ministry of Power and Energy. In the days to come, architects of the National Fuel Pass system said more developments such as a dashboard on the QR code fuel disbursement will be added to the software. The National Fuel Pass QR code system, the pioneer in putting an end to long fuel queues, has been upgraded with new features by its architects, the Information and Communication Technology Agency. One such feature included in the software is the registration of non-motor categories, allowing fuel to be dispersed at any filling station. The registration method is to be informed by the Ministry of Power and Energy.
We have identified certain set of categories where the fuel is needed. As an example, generators, grass cutters, or other equipments. All these categories now can be facilitated through the National Fuel Pass platform. After the registration, the quota will be decided by the Ministry of Power and Energy and will be informed to citizens similar to the motor category which we are doing right now.
The ICTA has also made the filling station code to be notified in the form of an SMS.
This was a requested feature by many. The advantage of this feature is that it allows you to track where the fuel is pumped if your QR code is misused, especially. So in an ordinary scenario, it might not be useful because you know where the fuel you are going to pump. But in a case of a scenario where your QR code is misused, once you get the SMS, you will know which station the fuel was pumped using your QR code. If your QR code is misused, the immediate thing citizen or the business has to do is delete the profile and re-register with us to obtain a new QR code.
In the days to come, ICTA says that more updates will be added to the National Fuel Pass system to make it even more friendlier to the user.
We are looking at a couple of new features to facilitate citizens as well as the department or Ministry of Power and Energy. For citizens, we are planning to do a dashboard where citizens can obtain information about the QR code disbursement. Right now, you don't know where the fuel is available because you don't know if you get a 6,000 litre Bowser, you don't know how much of a liters has been disbursed already. So with these dashboards and analytics to the public, they'll be able to know if there's a filling station nearby, whether the amount of fuel, what is the amount of fuel that has been disbursed.
Now, the Sri Lankan government signed a $200 million emergency assistance loan agreement with the Asian Development Bank and a $3 million grant from the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific. The agreements are expected to ensure access to food and protect livelihoods for the poor and the vulnerable, especially women and children. The Asian Development Bank and the government of Sri Lanka today signed a $200 million emergency assistance loan and a $3 million grant from the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific. In a statement, the Asian Development Bank said this will ensure access to food and protect livelihoods for the poor and the vulnerable, especially women and children. The loan funds have been repurposed for the ongoing ADB portfolio. Secretary to the Treasury and Ministry of Finance, K.M. Mahinda Sirivardhana, signed the loan agreement for the government of Sri Lanka, and ADB Country Director for Sri Lanka, Chen Chen, signed on behalf of the Asian Development Bank. The loan signing was witnessed by the Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, Mizukoshi Hideaki. Treasury Secretary Mahinda Sirivardhana said this emergency assistance loan will be provided to much-needed financing to ensure access to food and protect livelihoods of the poor and vulnerable during the unprecedented economic crisis that Sri Lanka is facing right now, adding that the project will provide crucial support to the government in extending assistance to vulnerable groups and restoring the livelihoods of the poor and vulnerable, including farmers. ADB Country Director for Sri Lanka, Chen Chen, said this loan forms part of the ADB's emergency response package to the multifaceted challenges facing Sri Lanka and moving forward. ADB will continue to work closely with development partners to support Sri Lanka's recovery from the economic crisis. For at least 3 months, the project will support the temporary increase in the monthly cash grant amount and the number of beneficiaries of the existing social assistance programs. In addition, it will replace the monthly food vouchers of pregnant and lactating women with higher cash value grants, while extending support to undernourished children under the age of 2. The $3 million grant from the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia will provide basic needs such as food, hygiene kits, and medicines. It will support livelihoods, development of vulnerable women and children, and strengthen support mechanisms for victims of gender-based and domestic violence. Japanese ambassador to Sri Lanka Mizukoshi Hideyaki said the support provided by the government and the people of Japan, in collaboration with the ADB, will provide the necessary protection and enhance the dignity of the people in need. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has advised officials to revise circulars immediately if it impedes the implementation of development projects. This was stated by the head of state during a discussion chaired by him at the President's office to examine the progress of several development projects in the country based on Indian investment cooperation. During the meeting, which also attended by Deputy High Commissioner of India, Vinod K. Jacob, President Wickremesinghe instructed the ministry's secretaries and government officials to take steps to resolve the obstacles that have arisen in the process of several projects in the country under Indian investments. The President also explained the need to correct the provisions contained in the circulars issued periodically by previous governments if they hinder development. Now, parliamentarian D.V. Chanaka, who took oaths as the State Minister of Conservation of Wildlife and Forest Reserves yesterday, switched his ministry and assumed work as the State Minister of Power and Energy. It is reported that the parliamentarian will no longer hold the state ministerial portfolio he was sworn in. Meanwhile, parliamentarian Indi Kanuruddha was sworn in as the State Minister of Power and Energy. Now, Sri Lanka received a donation of 5,000 metric tons of rice from China. The rice consignment was officially accepted by Minister of Education Dr. Susil Premajayantha from Chinese Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Chi Zheng-hong, at the Ministry of Education. The Chinese government has announced a rice donation for nearly 10 million school children in Sri Lanka to mark the long-standing friendship between Sri Lanka and China. It has been scheduled to cover 78% of the total number of schools in Sri Lanka by implementing the program at 7,925 selected schools. Welcome back. Now, Sri Lankan shares settled higher today for a third consecutive session to log their second straight weekly gain, supported by strength in industrial stocks. The CSE All Share Index ended up 1.9% at 9,704.21. For the week, the index gained 4.16%. On the SPI trading volume fell to 173.2 million shares from 292.4 million shares in the previous session. Conglomerates Expo Lanka Holdings PLC and John Keel's Holding PLC were the top boosts to the index, advancing 3.5% and 5.6% respectively. The equity market turnover was 4.13 billion rupees compared with 4.916 billion rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net sellers in the equity market, offloading nearly 343.1 million rupees worth of shares, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing 4.9 billion rupees worth of stocks. And that's all we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.